Tyler, so far so good. I mean, you get to this bye week 8-0, number one in the country. All the tests have been passed. A couple of relatively close games against Florida State and Texas A&M, but not a single game that really came down to the final possession. So I think everyone has to be pleased. Obviously, they need to get better for this stretch run, but you've watched every game. Just your impressions of this Alabama football team to this point.
Well, I mean, on the surface, you're right. Everything looks like it's chugging along pretty good, but I think that's also where you have to have a little bit of caution of exactly what have you seen lining up against you and how are you comparing it. If you're playing inferior talent, then you ought to be mopping the floor with them, so to speak, but you don't need to get a sense of superiority by any means because there's still several teams, I think, on the calendar. Saban even talked about it, how toughest games of the year are ahead of Alabama. So, what's our focus moving forward? And I think it's still too early to tell how good this football team is. I think until you face LSU and Auburn, there's still going to be a little doubt, at least in my mind, on how this team will perform in a tight game.
I agree because not many teams in the West have had success against Alabama, but the two teams that have had the most are LSU and Auburn. Both have beaten Alabama 3 times since Nick Saban came to Alabama. Also, Mississippi State, we know that's never a gimme when you go into Starkville. You kind of are echoing what Saban always says, that the key to any football team is to continue to get better and try to be playing your best at the end of the season. You've been there. You've done that. How difficult that is that during the course of a long season with injuries and players that may be getting frustrated with playing time to continue to improve all the way through? How difficult is that?
I think it's a natural process, honestly, because you're just working every day. And from the player standpoint, you're not looking at the big picture week one of where you're going to be and your goals of where you want to be at the end of the season necessarily. You're just trying to win that game. And I think you naturally, through practice and reps, are going to get better. At least you hope that you do. There are some teams that regress or they just kind of plateau because they reach their peak talent-wise. But I still think there's some upside with this football team. And I know with the competition level, obviously, that they have on a day-in and day-out basis, and you talked about playing time, and those guys want to get out on the field, so hopefully there's a little bit of an itch and a hunger to go out there and work hard.
Tyler Watts with us here on the Bud Light Hotline talking Alabama football. How impressive is it in that first game when Alabama lost 4 of its top linebackers, 3 starters, and Terrell Lewis, who is of starter caliber in terms of talent, and they were able to navigate that. They got Jennings back. Now Evans looks like he's rounding into form. They're still without those other 2, but to play the caliber of defense they played with those guys out, I don't know that there are many programs in the country that could overcome that loss of that many key players at the same position and continue to play as well as Alabama did. How impressive was that to you?
Well, that's kind of a tip your hat to what Jeremy Pruitt is doing on that side with mixing some different looks in there and trying to find personnel. You had Trayvon Diggs at cornerback to start the game versus Florida State, but that didn't last too long. So there's always moving pieces coming in and out. Levi Wallace goes in. Who's this guy? Never heard of him. And then he's been an incredible player there in the secondary. So you just continue to evaluate and work kids, and when they get their opportunity, see what they make, if they are able to make the most of it. And a lot of these guys have been able to do that. It's never been a question of talent. It's just been a question of going in there and making the plays and not making the mistakes, quite honestly, whether it's pre-snap alignment or what you do and trusting your eyes and what you've been coached on to do during the course of the week.
And then Deshaun Hand goes down. Hopefully he'll be back for the LSU game. But I guess, Tyler, the flip side of that is that when you have injuries, as Saban says, you have opportunities. And some younger guys have played. Now they've gotten valuable reps. LeBron Ray's played a lot the last couple of weeks. So you get Deshaun Hand back, and who knows, maybe even for the postseason you might get Lewis and or Miller or both of them back. So in the long run, I guess, maybe Alabama's benefited from that to some degree with many more players stepping up, particularly on the defensive front. Now, this is a lot deeper defensive line than it was even when they started the season.
Isaiah Buggs has kind of been the guy that's impressed me the most the last several weeks. And once again, a guy with a ton of talent, but was new to the program and didn't have the game reps. Well, now he's thrust into action. And, my goodness, 11 tackles versus Texas A&M. I think he had 8 or 9 last week versus Tennessee. He's been a dominant force over there on that side. So sometimes those opportunities like what you're talking about forces you to learn quick. And because they've recruited well and they've got talented guys, they're able to step in there and do a good job.
Now to the offense. And, boy, when you look at it on paper, it looks as good as any offense we've seen around here in a long time. Leading the SEC in rushing, which everybody wants to run the football. Alabama does it better than anybody else. Total offense, scoring offense. They lead it in everything. I want to talk about the quarterbacks, though, because you've got a unique perspective on this. You and Andrew Zal kind of went back and forth as starters and dealing with playing time. Sometimes it was because of injury, or sometimes it might have been because of matchup, but you guys went back and forth. Now you've got Jalen Hurts, who's an established starter, no doubt about that. Has only lost one game in his career, and that was in the national championship game. But you got a freshman in Tua Tagovailoa who just throws darts. I mean, it's amazing to watch his accuracy and his ability to hit wide receivers. So they're in a situation where you've got an established starter, but the other guy, the backup, the freshman, is earning playing time. How do you think they manage that going forward for the rest of the season?
Probably the same as they have to this point. Although Tagovailoa has played quite a bit, it's still in a relative mop-up situation. And who would have thought the second possessions of the second half against Tennessee would have been considered mop-up duty, but it was. The difference we continue to talk about, though, is this year when the younger guys go in the third and fourth quarter, nothing changes. The offense is run, and they're running it to their strengths to try to get them those game reps that we were talking about a minute ago, to improve them, to give them an opportunity, should they be needed in the first half, to go out there and feel confident in what they're doing. The passing game, honestly, is still the thing that concerns me more than anything with this offense. I think we've gone against several weak defenses the last several weeks where you've had the ability to run the football, and hopefully you can continue to do that. But what are you going to be able to do versus LSU's front seven and Auburn's front seven, who are, I think the game plan from here on out is going to be load the box, take away the run, and force Jalen Hurts to beat you with his arm. And to me, what kind of improvement has there been from last year to this year? Still a tremendously talented player. He's not relying near as much on his legs as he was a year ago, which is good to see. But some of those completions, you're still a little concerned with the timing of them and the delivery of the ball to get into the playmaker's hands. So that's a point of emphasis, in my opinion, for the remainder of the year, is how can Alabama improve on that? And A-Ball has done an incredible job, in my opinion, of mixing up the looks from week in to week out and inserting different players in different spots. We saw tight end used more. We've seen Josh Jacobs coming out of the backfield, which has been a huge asset. And then you got talented receivers all across the board, but you got to find ways to get them the ball and allow them to make plays after the catch.
All right, Tyler, with that said about the need to continue to improve in the passing game, and you make a great point, and I've been telling people that too. Tua has looked fabulous. He did work with the first-team offensive line against Tennessee. He has in other games, but you're right. I mean, he's come in when basically the games have been decided. As you point out, when it's 0-0 and you're going against a fresh defense, it's a whole different deal. Having said that, he has worked with the first-team offense a lot in practice in the first-team offensive line. He's gotten some first-team reps. He can throw the football beautifully. He has, other than the pick six, which, granted, that's a big mistake, but other than that, he was just about flawless against Tennessee. If you want to improve in the passing game, and you've got two different guys that can both do a lot of things but have some different strengths, can you play both? And is it a nightmare for a defending defensive coordinator, in your opinion, to have to prepare for both these guys?
From a defense coordinator perspective, maybe not. I think the only difference really is potentially the accuracy of the two quarterbacks, and I think Tua is a more accurate quarterback in the passing game. But Jalen brings a lot to the table that Tua does not. How does he balance it? Nick Saban, I've always said this, I've always admired the man for sticking with his quarterback. I'll take you back a couple of years ago when Alabama was playing Auburn in the Iron Bowl and Blake Sims was your quarterback. We're down 14. He doesn't flinch. He keeps confidence in his quarterback, and he puts him back out there on the field.
Right.
And from a player standpoint, playing that position, that's huge because your confidence never wavers. Trying to look over your shoulder, wondering if you're about to come out of the game or not, and you don't press as a result of it. So I don't see, honestly, outside of an injury, I don't see a scenario where you're implementing both quarterbacks playing in the first half for this year or ever under Nick Saban. I just don't see it.
For Tua Tagovailoa, who seems to be a great young man and a terrific teammate, and the same thing for Jalen. I think they've handled it well. But you played in a situation with a lot different than this. You had different coaches during your time, different offenses, but you and Zal went back and forth some. As a quarterback, you want your opportunity. When Tua gets in there, he wants his. But if you're not the starter, but you know there's always a chance you're going to play, what's that like? How do you keep yourself ready? How do you stay into the game when you're not in the game, but there's a chance you could be?
Well, you better be prepared because you're going to get that opportunity, and if you don't do your job and what's expected of you, you're going to look like a fool in front of 100,000 people, and that is a key motivation. You don't want to let your teammates down. You don't want to let your coaches down who have a lot of confidence in you. You don't want to let yourself down and your parents down. So you go out there and work hard, realizing that the situation potentially may come, it potentially may not, but you want to be prepared regardless of how that is. And that's just not that position. That's across the board. I think that's harped on continually, and they see guys who complain in the locker room about playing time or anything like that, and then get that opportunity and don't perform, and it's embarrassing, and you don't want that to happen to you.
Tyler Watt's with us here on the Bud Light Hotline talking Alabama football. For this program where it's at, last year was an incredible year, and in most schools around the country, it would have been a highlight reel year, even if they didn't win the national championship, to get to that point. For Alabama, it seems to kind of be championship or bust. Is that the case this year? Anything short of a national championship? And not necessarily in terms of the players, but for the fan base, is anything short of a national championship a disappointment?
Well, fans are delusional to begin with. We all are. And we think that the performance versus Tennessee or versus Colorado State is how we're going to beat up on every opponent that we play. And that's natural. That's not just us. That's across the country. Every week's different, though. It's how you play that particular day. And the upside is obviously there to achieve a lot, but there are also some teams on your schedule that can give you some fits if you're not playing 100% or if you're making mistakes out there. And I still think that there's 4 or 5 teams in the country that can all compete with each other on any day. And then outside of that, everybody's in another ball field. They're not even competitive. So you just take it a week at a time and try to enjoy the challenge in front of you and let the rest of it play out.
Lane Kiffin for 3 years was the offensive coordinator. There were 3 college football playoffs, 3 SEC championships, 1 national championship. Of course, he left a game early last year. Brian Dable, you brought him up in his first season. Do you like this offense better than what you saw of the Lane Kiffin offenses? I know that's a tough question, but what do you see from the Dable offense that maybe you like better, and maybe what do you see that you liked better from the Kiffin offenses?
Well, after getting educated on the jet sweep and kind of understanding the reason for running it so much, I can appreciate the fact that we did it so often in the last couple of years, but I sure am glad we don't see it near as often as we did. I've enjoyed the downhill running. You're mixing up your backs. They seem to be hitting the holes hard, and you're spreading the ball around. I think he's been pretty doggone creative with what he's done in the passing game. It was kind of like what I talked about a minute ago with targeting different players against personnel and formations, and he's been very creative and has not been consistent week in and week out with the different looks that he's given, and I've enjoyed watching that. I think that he does a good job over there. Is it right to compare and say this one's better than that one? Not necessarily. But won a lot of football games under Lane Kiffin. He did a ton of things right, and he took a young quarterback. In fact, he took 3 young quarterbacks who hadn't had any experience and got the most out of them, and there's something to be said about that. We can talk about him as a person all we want to, but as far as out there coaching up your quarterbacks, he's pretty doggone good. Brian Dable, though, I think will take Jalen hopefully to the next level of understanding what he's doing and why he's doing it, and give him a little more freedom out there to be the on-the-field general and make some of those calls so that he can advance his game.
I know in your role as an analyst, you obviously watch the quarterbacks, but you watch the whole team, and you watch the offensive line a lot. I think this offensive line has been very good, but I don't have the eye that you have. This offensive line, in your opinion, playing at a championship level, is it good enough to do what it's done against some of these lesser teams when it plays the LSU defensive fronts, the Auburn defensive fronts, maybe Georgia in the SEC championship game? What do you think of this offensive line play so far for Alabama, and how much better does it need to get?
Well, moving forward, it remains to be seen. If you can watch that front on any particular down, you're going to tell if it's a successful play or not, whether it's the run and they're getting a push, or if there's penetration and leakage through there in the passing game. Those are the kind of things that concern you, is just what kind of movement is there on the line of scrimmage. And it's difficult from the standpoint of we don't always understand the complex blocking schemes going up where you're chipping, you're helping, you're getting up to the next level. and you're having to do that while the defense is moving against you. So they're strong, they're big, they seem to be gelling more so now than even at the beginning of the season, but they got to continue to get better, and that's across the board at every position on this team.
Wrapping up with Tyler Watts, you've said a lot without even trying to say it, but the truth of the matter is Alabama, as we talked about, has gotten to where it's gotten. It's in perfect position, but it does have to finish. And you know better than anybody what it's like to play in this league against these kind of teams, especially that game that looms at Auburn, that last game of the season. You went down there in '99, and you were on the first Alabama team to ever win at Jordan-Hare Stadium. But give the listeners just a little bit of a feel, not sitting in the stands or watching on television, but what it's like to be a player there for Alabama in an environment where you know, other than your fans, boy, those people don't care for you. They make it tough. Auburn gets jacked up to a different level when they're playing Alabama at home. How difficult is that Iron Bowl going to be, in your opinion? How difficult a place is it to play for Alabama?
I've always said I think it's easier as a player than it is as a fan. Not that you're worried about what people are saying to you, but your concentration and your focus is just in a little bit different place.
So you are able to kind of able to block all that out.
Yeah, I think that the players play the play, and they realize that it's a long game, and they're only focused on the next one, the next play. And we're looking at the big picture of holding on to the lead and the clock and this, that, and the other, and what are they going to do? And they're worried. Those players are just out there playing. They got so much on their mind, any particular snap, they ain't got time to think about the rest of it. So it's easier from that standpoint. Now, I will say this. It is a different atmosphere. And LSU is fun, but Auburn is an energetic, highly just a fanatical stadium during the Iron Bowl. But it's fun, and these guys have experienced this before, so it won't be anything for them. But Auburn does play Alabama well down there, and they will pull some plays out that you just don't think are possible, and call it luck, call it whatever, be in the right position at the right time. But it always ends up being a little bit more than we were bargaining for. And, you know, Alabama sit in the same position in 2013, go down there and are up 2 scores and squandered away plenty of opportunities to put more points on the board and come, get beat. So anything can happen. You better continue to play for 4 quarters.
Final question. The way I always handicap a game is I look at the two teams and I say, first of all, if both teams play their best, who wins? And basically every time I look at an opponent for Alabama, it's Alabama. In your opinion, and granted, there are factors. Injuries, you don't play a great game, you play somebody that's capable of beating you if you don't play your best. But if Alabama plays in every individual game its best, is there anybody out there, in your opinion, in the country, SEC or otherwise, that's capable of beating Alabama if the Tide is at its best?
Great question. I hadn't had a chance to see everybody for 4 quarters or multiple games this season, so I can't answer that. But I do know this. The true answer to it is no one ever plays their best game.
Okay.
So when do those mistakes come? When do the missed opportunities fall? And where on the field do they happen? A lot of that plays into the outcome of a ball game. So, just enjoy it for what it is. It's a ball game. We're going to line it up again next year and do it again. But this is a good football team. Enjoy watching them play. A lot of talent out there on the field, and hopefully they'll continue to get better and make it a successful season.
Well, it's an unbelievable run, and it's 10 years in the making, and I don't think, of course, a lot of people said that, me included, after Coach Bryant's run, that we would ever see it again, but I don't think we'll ever see anything like this again in college football once Saban is done at Alabama, but we shall see.